Chapter 1, Introduction to International Digital Marketing Licensing. Chapter Overview. This chapter serves as a foundational introduction to the concept of licensing within the realm of international digital marketing. It defines key terms, establishes the strategic importance of licensing as a market entry and growth strategy, traces its evolution alongside digital technology, and introduces the essential lexicon used by professionals in the field. 11. Definition and scope. Definition. International digital marketing licensing is a strategic business arrangement where the owner of a digital marketing asset, the licensor, such as a brand, technology, software, content, or proprietary methodology, grants permission to a foreign entity, the licensee, to use that asset for marketing, promotion, and sales activities in a specific geographic territory for a specified period, in exchange for financial compensation, typically royalties or a fee. Scope. The scope of this field is broad and encompasses a wide range of intangible assets, brand and trademark licensing, allowing a foreign partner to use brand names, logos, characters, and trademarks in their digital ads, social media, and websites, e.g., a local influencer in Brazil licensed to use a global fashion brand's logo in their Instagram campaigns. Technology and software licensing, granting rights to use proprietary marketing technology platforms. This includes marketing automation SaaS, software as a service, customer relationship management, CRM, systems analytics and data visualization tools, AI-powered ad targeting algorithms. Content licensing, authorizing the use of created content such as articles, blogs, and white papers, videos, documentaries, and ad films, photography and infographics, music and soundscapes for digital commercials. Patent licensing, granting rights to use patented marketing methodologies or data processing techniques. Franchise digital systems, licensing the entire digital operational model, including website templates, social media playbooks, and online ordering systems, to franchisees in other countries. The scope is not just the transaction but the entire life cycle, negotiation, legal compliance, transfer of knowledge, quality control, and performance measurement across borders. 12. Importance of licensing in global markets. Licensing is a critical tool for achieving global marketing objectives, offering distinct advantages over other market entry strategies. Like exporting or direct investment, one accelerated market entry, licensing allows a brand to enter new international markets rapidly by leveraging a local licensee's existing infrastructure, market knowledge, and customer base. There is no need to build a local entity from scratch. To risk mitigation, it significantly reduces financial, political, and operational risk for the licensor. The licensee typically bears the cost of local marketing execution and adaptation, insulating the parent company from potential losses. 3. Local expertise and cultural adaptation. A local licensee possesses invaluable insights into cultural nuances, consumer behavior, language, and digital landscape, e.g., dominant local platforms like WeChat in China or KakaoTalk in South Korea. This ensures marketing campaigns are culturally relevant and effective. For revenue diversification, licensing creates a high-margin, scalable revenue stream through royalty payments, turning intangible marketing assets into profitable commodities without significant additional cost. 5. Competitive advantage. It can create a barrier to entry for competitors by establishing a strong, locally managed digital presence quickly and forming key partnerships. 6. Brand building and consistency. Allows for global brand presence and consistency in messaging while allowing for necessary local customization, strengthening the brand's international footprint. 13. Evolution of digital marketing and licensing frameworks. The practice of licensing has evolved dramatically alongside digital technology. Pre-digital era, traditional licensing focus was primarily on manufacturing and merchandising, e.g., licensing a cartoon character for t-shirts. Marketing licensing was limited to traditional media like TV and print, with cumbersome and slow enforcement mechanisms. The dawn of the digital age, 1990s to 2000s. The rise of the Internet introduced software licensing, e.g., Microsoft Office, and early content licensing for websites. Frameworks were nascent, focused on IP protection in a new, borderless environment. The social and mobile revolution, 2010s. The explosion of social media, smartphones, and SaaS models fundamentally changed licensing. Asset proliferation, new digital assets emerged, influencer personas, social media algorithms, app data, SaaS licensing. The shift from one-time software purchases to subscription-based cloud services became the dominant model for tech licensing. Need for speed, the real-time nature of digital marketing demanded faster, more agile licensing agreements. The modern era, 2020s, present characterized by data privacy regulations, AI, and hyperglobalization. Regulatory complexity, frameworks now must rigorously comply with GDPR, CCPA, and other data protection laws that vary by country. Licensing agreements explicitly dictate how customer data can be used. AI and automation, licensing of AI-driven tools for predictive analytics, personalization, and ad buying is now standard. New questions about IP ownership of AI-generated content are shaping modern contracts. Micro-licensing, the ability to license specific digital assets, e.g., a single video or data set, for short-term campaigns through digital rights marketplaces. 14 Key concepts and terminology. Licensor, the owner of the intellectual property or digital asset who grants the license. Licensee, the entity or individual in the foreign market that is granted the rights to use the asset. Royalty, an ongoing payment, typically a percentage of revenue generated by the licensed asset, made by the licensee to the licensor. Upfront fee/license fee, a one-time payment made at the beginning of the licensing agreement. Intellectual property, IP, intangible creations of the mind, such as inventions, literary works, symbols, names, and images used in commerce. The core subject of a licensing agreement. Territory, the specific geographical region, e.g., Japan, European Union, where the licensee is authorized to operate. Term, the duration for which the license is valid. Field of use, defines the specific ways the licensed asset can be used, e.g., for social media advertising only, not for use in political campaigns. Exclusivity, a clause stating whether the license is exclusive, the licensor cannot grant other licenses in the territory, or non-exclusive. Quality control, QC/brand guidelines, a critical set of rules and standards the licensee must follow to maintain the brand's integrity and value. This is especially crucial in digital marketing for consistent messaging. Sub-licensing, the right granted to the licensee to further license the asset to a third party, often requiring the licensor's direct approval. Digital rights management, DRM, technologies and strategies used to control the use of digital content and devices after a license is granted. Chapter 2, Global Regulatory Frameworks and Compliance for You. The main contents are as follows: International Licensing Agreements. Compares GDPR and CCPA/CPRA frameworks and their operational implications, regional variations in digital marketing laws, examines divergent regulatory approaches across North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific, cross-border compliance requirements, details risk assessment, adaptation strategies, and technology solutions for global operations. EU vs US licensing case study, contrasts foundational philosophies, enforcement mechanisms, and practical compliance approaches. Then, I will now begin writing the main body of the chapter. Chapter 2, Global Regulatory Frameworks and Compliance in International Digital Marketing Licensing. 21 International Licensing Agreements, e.g., GDPR, CCPA. International digital marketing licensing agreements operate within a complex framework of data protection regulations that vary significantly across jurisdictions. The General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, in the European Union and the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA/California Privacy Rights Act, CPRA, in the United States represent two foundational frameworks that have reshaped how businesses collect, process, and transfer personal data in digital marketing contexts. These regulations establish legally binding requirements for organizations handling personal information, regardless of their physical location, creating extraterritorial obligations that impact international licensing agreements. The GDPR, implemented in May 2018, establishes stringent requirements for Processing personal data of individuals located in the European Union and European Economic Area. It applies to any organization offering goods or services to EU residents or monitoring their behavior, making it particularly relevant for international digital marketing operations under GDPR. Valid licensing agreements must incorporate lawful processing bases such as explicit consent, contract necessity, or legitimate interests. The regulation mandates that data collection be limited to specified explicit purposes and requires comprehensive transparency measures informing data subjects about how their information will be used. Additionally, GDPR imposes strict cross-border data transfer restrictions, requiring adequate protection measures when personal data flows outside the EEA. Conversely, the CCPA/CPRA framework, effective January 2020, with CPRA amendments expanding it in 2023, establishes a different approach to data protection, primarily focusing on California residents' rights. Rather than imposing overarching processing conditions unlike GDPR's opt-in consent model for most processing activities, CCPA generally operates on an opt-out paradigm where businesses can collect and use personal information without prior consent, provided they offer clear mechanisms for consumers to opt out of the sale or sharing of their data. However, the CPRA introduced enhanced protections for sensitive personal information and established the California Privacy Protection Agency, CPPA, as dedicated enforcement body. Table: key differences between GDPR and CCPA/CPRA frameworks. Aspect: GDPR CCPA/CPRA legal basis requirement requires one of 6 specified legal bases for processing. No requirement for legal basis for most processing, focuses on consumer rights. Consent standard: explicit opt-in consent required for many processing activities. Generally opt-out model for data sales/sharing. Opt-in for minors. Data geographic scope applies to processing of EU/EEA residents' data regardless of location. Applies to businesses handling California residents' data meeting thresholds. Enforcement authority: national data protection authorities in each member state. California Privacy Protection Agency, CPPA. Maximum penalties €20 million or 4% of global annual turnover, whichever is higher. $7,500 per intentional violation under CPRA. For international digital marketing licensing, these regulatory differences create significant compliance complexities. Organizations operating globally must implement flexible framework agreements that can accommodate varying legal requirements across jurisdictions. Licensing agreements must address data processing purposes, retention periods, security measures, and sub-processing relationships in ways that satisfy both GDPR's principle-based approach and CCPA's disclosure-focused requirements. Additionally, marketers must establish consent management mechanisms that can handle GDPR's explicit consent requirements alongside CCPA's opt-out mechanisms for data sales. The operational impact on digital marketing activities is substantial. Under GDPR, organizations must implement privacy by design approaches in their marketing technologies and campaigns, conducting data protection impact assessments for high-risk processing activities. Cookie usage and tracking technologies require prior informed consent before activation, with pre-ticked boxes explicitly invalidated by European courts. Meanwhile, CCPA compliance necessitates notice at collection mechanisms and do not sell or share my personal information links on digital properties, plus processes to honor verifiable consumer requests within specified time frames. 22 regional variations in digital marketing laws. Digital marketing regulations demonstrate significant regional divergence reflecting different cultural values, legal traditions, and policy approaches to privacy and consumer protection. These variations create a complex compliance landscape for organizations engaged in international digital marketing, requiring nuanced understanding of regional requirements rather than one-size-fits-all approaches. In North America, regulation primarily occurs at the state and sectoral levels rather than through comprehensive federal legislation. The United States approach is characterized by patchwork regulation, with the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, serving as the primary federal enforcement agency against deceptive and unfair practices. The FTC's guidelines on online advertising and endorsement disclosures require clear and conspicuous disclosures of material connections between advertisers and endorsers, including social media influencers at the state level. California's CCPA/CPRA has emerged as a de facto national standard due to its extensive requirements and California's market size, but other states including Virginia, Colorado, Utah, and Connecticut have enacted their own comprehensive privacy laws with variations in requirements and exemptions. Canada's privacy framework combines federal PIPTA legislation with provincial laws, generally following opt-out consent models for commercial information but moving towards stricter requirements under proposed Consumer Privacy Protection Act. The European approach is characterized by comprehensive, rights-based frameworks with stronger emphasis on fundamental privacy rights. The GDPR establishes a baseline across EU member states, but countries have implemented national variations through derogations in certain areas. The e-Privacy Directive, soon to be replaced by the e-Privacy Regulation, imposes specific requirements for electronic communications, including rules for cookies and similar tracking technologies. European regulations generally adopt a precautionary approach to data processing, requiring privacy by design and by default, and imposing strict limitations on profiling and automated decision-making in marketing contexts. The EU's emerging regulatory framework for artificial intelligence will further complicate digital marketing activities that utilize automated content personalization and targeting. In the Asia-Pacific region, approaches vary considerably between developed and developing economies. Countries like Japan and South Korea have established comprehensive privacy frameworks deemed adequate by the EU Commission, facilitating data transfers between these jurisdictions and Europe. Australia's Privacy Act 1988 and Spam Act 2003 impose strict requirements for commercial electronic messages and overseas data transfers. China has implemented increasingly stringent privacy laws, including the Personal Information Protection Law, PIPL, which incorporates elements similar to GDPR but with distinct requirements for cross-border data transfers and consent. Meanwhile, many Southeast Asian nations are still developing comprehensive frameworks, creating a regulatory fragmentation that challenges regional marketing campaigns. Table, comparative overview of regional digital marketing regulatory approaches. Region regulatory philosophy. Key legislation. Consent model enforcement focus European Union rights-based, comprehensive GDPR, e-Privacy Directive. Explicit opt-in harmonization, fundamental rights. United States sectoral, litigation-driven. CCPA/CPRA, state laws, FTC guidelines. Predominantly opt-out. Consumer protection, deception. Asia-Pacific varied, developing to comprehensive. PIPL, China, APPI, Japan, Privacy Act, Australia, mixed approaches. Increasingly stringent enforcement. Latin America, following EU model. LGPD, Brazil, PDPA, Argentina, largely opt-in. Developing enforcement capacity. These regional disparities create particular challenges in several key areas of digital marketing. For consent mechanisms, the EU requires granular, purpose-specific consent obtained before placing cookies, with exceptions for strictly necessary cookies, while the US generally permits implied consent through continued browsing except for certain state-specific requirements. For consumer rights handling, GDPR provides comprehensive access, rectification, erasure, and portability rights with short response timelines, while CCPA focuses primarily on access, deletion, and opt-out rights with different response requirements. Regarding data transfers, the EU restricts transfers to countries without adequacy decisions, requiring standard contractual clauses or other mechanisms, while US regulations impose fewer outbound transfer restrictions but more limitations on specific categories of information. The enforcement approaches also differ substantially across regions. European data protection authorities employ a proactive investigative approach and can impose fines of up to 4% of global annual turnover under GDPR. US enforcement typically follows a complaint-driven model with regulatory actions initiated by the FTC or state attorneys general, supplemented by private rights of action under certain state laws. Asia-Pacific enforcement ranges from rigorous in jurisdictions like South Korea and Australia to still developing in emerging economies. creating an uneven compliance imperative for marketers operating across the region. 23 Compliance requirements for cross-border operations. Cross-border compliance in digital marketing necessitates adherence to multiple, often conflicting, regulatory frameworks simultaneously. Organizations operating internationally must implement comprehensive compliance strategies that address divergent legal requirements while maintaining operational efficiency. The complexity of cross-border operations requires a multifaceted approach encompassing legal, technical, and organizational measures. A foundational element of cross-border compliance is conducting thorough risk assessments to identify applicable regulatory frameworks based on the organization's data processing activities, geographic presence, and target markets. This assessment must consider not only where the organization is established but also where its customers and website visitors are located, as many data protection laws have extraterritorial application for digital marketing activities. This typically means compliance obligations are triggered when targeting or monitoring individuals in specific jurisdictions, regardless of the marketer's physical location. Risk assessments should map data flows across borders, identify potential compliance gaps, and prioritize remediation efforts based on regulatory severity and enforcement likelihood. Implementing adaptive compliance frameworks represents another critical requirement for cross-border operations. Rather than creating entirely separate compliance programs for each jurisdiction, organizations should develop modular frameworks that incorporate global baseline standards supplemented by region-specific adaptations. These frameworks typically include standardized data classification systems that categorize personal information according to sensitivity and regulatory requirements, uniform retention schedules that establish maximum retention periods based on the strictest applicable requirements, cross-border transfer mechanisms such as standard contractual clauses, binding corporate rules, or supplementary measures for jurisdictions without adequacy decisions, incident response protocols that address varying breach notification timelines and requirements across jurisdictions, vendor management procedures that ensure third-party processors comply with applicable regulations. Through contractual obligations and audits, the technical implementation of cross-border compliance requires robust consent management platforms, CMPS, that can deliver region-specific consent experiences, capture granular preferences, and maintain comprehensive audit trails. These platforms must dynamically adapt to users' locations and provide transparent preference centers where individuals can exercise their rights regardless of jurisdiction. For cookie compliance, CMPS should implement cookie walls or contextual consent banners that meet the specific requirements of each jurisdiction, particularly the GDPR's strict standards for valid consent. Additionally, organizations need data mapping tools that provide visibility into personal data flows across systems and borders, enabling compliance with data protection impact assessment requirements and facilitating responses to consumer rights requests. Table essential components of cross-border compliance program. Component purpose considerations. Implementation legal basis assessment ensure appropriate lawful basis for each processing activity per jurisdiction. Document processing purposes and lawful basis prioritize consent where required. Cross-border transfer mechanisms facilitate lawful international data transfers. Implement SCCs, BCRs, or supplementary measures. Conduct transfer impact assessments. Consumer rights framework enable exercise of access, deletion, portability, and other rights. Establish verified request processes, meet jurisdiction-specific response timelines. Vendor management ensure third-party processors comply with obligations. Conduct due diligence, include strict data protection terms in contracts, audit periodically. Incident response plan prepare for potential data breaches across jurisdictions. Establish jurisdiction-specific notification protocols, maintain incident documentation. Organizational measures are equally critical for cross-border compliance. These include appointing local representatives in jurisdictions where required, such as GDPR Article 27 representatives for non-EU establishments, designating data protection officers where appropriate, and establishing clear accountability structures with defined roles and responsibilities for compliance. Employee training programs must address region-specific requirements and be tailored to different functions within the organization, with specialized content for marketing teams regarding permissible data uses, consent requirements, and disclosure obligations. Regular compliance audits and penetration testing help identify and address gaps before they result in regulatory violations. The dynamic nature of digital marketing regulations necessitates ongoing monitoring of legal developments across all jurisdictions where the organization operates. Regulatory changes can impact multiple aspects of marketing operations, from lead generation practices to personalization algorithms and analytics implementations. Organizations should establish processes for tracking proposed legislation, regulatory guidance, and enforcement actions, with mechanisms for rapidly assessing the impact of changes and implementing necessary adjustments to compliance frameworks. 24 Case Study, EU vs US licensing approaches. The divergent approaches between the European Union and United States regarding data protection and digital marketing regulation present instructive case studies in regulatory compatibility challenges. These differences stem from fundamentally distinct philosophical foundations, enforcement mechanisms, and practical requirements that impact how organizations structure their international licensing agreements and marketing operations. The foundational philosophical differences between the EU and US approaches are significant. EU data protection law, particularly the GDPR, treats privacy as a fundamental human right derived from Article 8 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. This rights-based approach prioritizes individual control over personal data and imposes obligations on organizations as stewards of that data. In contrast, the US approach views privacy primarily through a consumer protection lens, focusing on preventing tangible harm rather than recognizing an inherent right to data protection. This philosophical divergence manifests in substantive regulatory differences. GDPR establishes comprehensive principles for processing personal data, while US regulation tends towards sector-specific rules addressing particular concerns, e.g., health information under HIPAA, financial data under GLBA, or children's information under COPPA. The consent paradigms under each framework illustrate these philosophical differences. Practically, GDPR generally requires explicit, informed consent that is specific, unambiguous, and provided through a clear affirmative action. Article 4:11, consent must be freely given, meaning it cannot be bundled with other terms or made conditional for service access unless the processing is strictly necessary for that service. The validity requirements for consent are stringent, with pre-ticked boxes or inactivity specifically invalidated by the Court of Justice of the European Union. In contrast, U.S. regulations generally employ more flexible consent standards, often permitting implied consent or opt-out mechanisms for many types of data processing. The CCPA/CPRA, for example, primarily requires businesses to provide California consumers with notice and the right to opt out of the sale or sharing of their personal information, rather than requiring upfront consent for collection. Enforcement mechanisms also differ substantially between the regimes. GDPR enforcement is conducted by independent supervisory authorities in each member state, with coordination through the European Data Protection Board. These authorities have broad investigative and corrective powers, including the ability to impose fines of up to €20 million or 4% of global annual turnover, whichever is higher. GDPR also provides a private right of action for data subjects who have suffered material or non-material damage. U.S. enforcement is more fragmented, with the FTC and state attorneys general serving as primary enforcement entities under most privacy laws. Penalties vary by statute but are generally lower than under GDPR. For example, CPRA establishes penalties of up to $7,500 per intentional violation. Several state laws provide limited private rights of action, typically for security breaches rather than general compliance failures. These philosophical and structural differences create practical compliance challenges for organizations operating in both jurisdictions. Digital marketers must implement dual compliance strategies that satisfy both regimes' requirements. For example, a company collecting personal data through its website might need to implement granular consent mechanisms for EU visitors that meet GDPR standards while providing clear opt-out mechanisms for California visitors under CPRA, maintain separate processing legal bases for different regions, potentially relying on consent for EU processing while using legitimate interests or other bases for non-EU processing where appropriate. establish divergent retention schedules based on the strictest requirements in each jurisdiction, implement different disclosure practices in privacy policies and notices to address varying transparency requirements, maintain separate protocols for handling consumer rights requests, respecting different response timelines and verification requirements. The cross-border data transfer challenge further complicates EU's digital marketing operations. The invalidation of the EU's Privacy Shield framework by the Court of Justice of the European Union in Schrems II means that organizations transferring personal data from the EU to the US must rely on alternative mechanisms, primarily standard contractual clauses, SCCs, supplemented by additional safeguards where necessary. These transfers require organizations to conduct transfer impact assessments evaluating the legal framework of the destination country and implementing supplementary measures where needed to ensure equivalent protection. US-based companies receiving personal data from the EU must often implement technical safeguards such as encryption and strict access controls, plus organizational measures like confidentiality agreements and training, to address perceived deficiencies in US surveillance laws. Despite these challenges, there are emerging efforts toward regulatory convergence in certain areas. The California Privacy Protection Agency has indicated some interest in aligning with international standards, and the CPRA incorporated several concepts from GDPR, including data protection impact assessments and limitations on automated decision-making. Similarly, recent U.S. federal privacy proposals have drawn inspiration from GDPR principles. However, fundamental differences remain, likely due to the distinct cultural and legal traditions underlying each approach. This case study illustrates that successful navigation of the EU's regulatory divide requires organizations to avoid a minimalist checklist compliance approach in favor of developing a comprehensive privacy management program that incorporates the strongest elements of both frameworks. By implementing robust data governance, transparency, and individual rights mechanisms that meet the highest standard of either jurisdiction, organizations can create efficient compliance programs that satisfy regulatory requirements across their operations while building trust with consumers globally. Chapter 3, Licensing Models. In Digital Marketing Chapter Overview, this chapter examines the various licensing models prevalent in international digital marketing. It categorizes and defines the primary types of licenses, explores the distinct models of franchising and white labeling, delves into the critical management of intellectual property rights and royalty structures, and concludes with a practical analysis of licensing within social media ecosystems. 31 Types of licenses, e.g., content, software, data. In international digital marketing, licensing agreements are specialized based on the type of asset being licensed. Each type comes with its own set of considerations, restrictions, and best practices. Content licensing. This involves granting rights to use created digital content. It is crucial for scaling content marketing efforts across borders. Assets, articles, blog posts, videos, infographics, photographs, music, podcasts, and course materials. Key considerations. Licenses specify the scope of use, e.g., geographic territories, platforms, duration, modification rights, can the licensee adapt the content, and exclusivity. A common model is a non-exclusive license allowing the content owner to license the same asset to multiple parties. Use case. A European market research firm licenses its industry reports to an Asian digital agency for translation and distribution to its local clients. Software and technology licensing. This is fundamental to operating in the digital space, granting access to the platforms and tools that power marketing assets, software as a service, SaaS, platforms, e.g., CRM, marketing automation, analytics tools, APIs, algorithms, and proprietary software. Key considerations. These agreements focus on access rights, user seats, read/write permissions, service level agreements, SLAs, uptime, support, data ownership, who owns the input/output data, and integration rights. The subscription-based licensing model is dominant in this category. Use case. A US-based marketing automation platform licenses its software to a Brazilian agency under a monthly subscription per user, with an SLA guaranteeing 995% uptime. Data licensing. The licensing of data for targeting, analytics, and personalization is a high-value but highly regulated area. Assets, first-party data, e.g., customer lists; second-party data, data from a partner; third-party data, aggregated data from brokers; and anonymized analytics data. Key considerations: agreements must rigorously address regulatory compliance, GDPR, CCPA consent mechanisms, permitted use, e.g., for modeling but not for direct targeting, anonymization standards, and strict prohibitions on re-identification. The legality of data licensing is entirely dependent on the provenance and lawful basis of the data collection use case. A German automotive company licenses its first-party customer data, with proper consent, to a licensed partner in Mexico for a coordinated cross-border product launch campaign. Brand and trademark licensing, extending a brand's reach into new markets through local partners. Assets, brand names, logos, slogans, color schemes, and brand characters. Key considerations: the licensor must enforce strict brand guidelines to maintain consistency. Agreements detail exactly where and how the brand assets can be used in digital media, e.g., social media ads, email signatures, website logos. Quality control audits are a standard clause. Use case: a Japanese anime studio licenses its character trademarks to a South American gaming company to develop and market a mobile game. 32 Franchising and white labeling in digital services. These two models represent more comprehensive forms of licensing, where not just an asset but an entire business system or product is licensed. White labeling definition: a model where a company, the manufacturer/developer, produces a product or service, and another company, the marketer, rebrands and sells it as its own. The end client is unaware of the originating company. Digital marketing application, common with SaaS products. A digital agency often white labels services like SEO reporting tools, social media management platforms, or email marketing software to provide a seamless, branded experience to their clients without building the technology themselves. Agreement focus: the white label agreement governs the rights to rebrand, technical support responsibilities, service resale pricing, and limits on the licensor's direct competition. Franchising definition: a more extensive model where a franchisor licenses its entire business system, operational model, brand, and support to a franchisee. It is a holistic approach to replication. Digital marketing application: a digital marketing franchise, e.g., a local SEO agency franchise, provides the franchisee with the entire digital toolkit, proprietary software, campaign playbooks, training materials, brand assets, and a defined territory. The franchisee operates under the franchisor's brand and strict operational guidelines. Agreement focus: franchise agreements are complex and cover territorial rights, fee structures, upfront fees and ongoing royalties, mandated marketing expenditures, e.g., contributing to a national ad fund, and detailed operational controls table. Key differences between white labeling and franchising aspect: white labeling: franchising brand identity, licensees brand, franchisors brand. Client relationship: licensee owns the client relationship, franchisee owns the client relationship. Under the franchisor's brand scope limited to a specific product or service, the entire business operation and system control, moderate control over how the product is sold, high degree of control over operations and branding, investment, typically lower fees, focused on product cost, high upfront franchise fee and ongoing royalties. 33 Intellectual property rights and royalties: the core of any licensing agreement is the clear definition of IP ownership and the financial mechanism for compensation. Intellectual property rights, ownership retention: a fundamental principle is that the licensor retains ownership of the underlying IP. The license grants only a right to use the IP, not to own it. New IP creation: agreements must address derivative works, who owns improvements or modifications made by the licensee, and jointly developed IP. Typically, the licensor owns anything derived from its core IP, while jointly developed IP may be co-owned or assigned to one party. Protection and enforcement: the agreement specifies who is responsible for monitoring and enforcing IP rights against third-party infringements, often the licensor, but sometimes with cooperation or cost sharing from the licensee. Royalty structures, royalty types: The financial terms are highly negotiable and vary based on the industry and asset value. Revenue based, percent of gross/net revenue, a percentage of the revenue generated from the use of the licensed IP. Most common model: fee per unit, a fixed fee for each unit sold or each time the asset is used, e.g., per email sent through a white-labeled platform. Tiered royalties, the percentage changes as sales volume increases. Incentivizing performance: fixed fee/flat rate, a simple recurring fee, common in software subscriptions and white labeling. Audit rights, a critical clause for the licensor is the right to audit the licensee's records to verify accurate royalty reporting. This ensures compliance and protects the licensor's revenue stream. 34 Practical example: licensing in social media platforms. Social media platforms are both licensors of their own technology and environments where user-generated content is licensed, creating a complex web of licensing agreements. 1. User-to-platform licensing, the platform TOS. When a user posts content on a platform like Instagram or TikTok, they grant the platform a broad, royalty-free, licensable license to use, modify, distribute, and display that content. This is outlined in the platform's terms of service, TOS. This license is necessary for the platform to operate, for example, to display your post on another user's feed or to promote it through their algorithms. 2. Platform-to-user licensing, APIs. Platforms license access to their data and functionality through application programming interfaces, APIs. A digital marketing tool like Hootsuite or Sprout Social operates by licensing API access from Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. The agreement, this license strictly defines what data can be accessed, how often it can be called, rate limiting, and how it can be used, e.g., forbidding the licensing of Twitter data to third-party data brokers. The compliance challenge, changes to API terms, as seen with Twitter's API v2 rollout, can instantly disrupt licensed services, forcing marketers to adapt their tools and strategies. 3. User-to-user licensing, influencer and content agreements. A brand hiring an influencer licenses the right to use the influencer's content, a video, photo, in its own marketing channels. This is a formal content licensing agreement that must specify scope. Can the brand use the content only on Instagram, or also on their website, email, and TV ads? Exclusivity, can the influencer work with competing brands during the campaign period? Modification, can the brand edit the video? Duration, is the license perpetual, or for 1 year? This ecosystem demonstrates the multi-layered nature of modern digital marketing licensing, where a single marketing campaign can involve navigating licenses from platforms, creators, and software tools simultaneously. Chapter 4, Digital Marketing Certification and Credentialing. Chapter Overview. This chapter explores the critical role of professional certifications in the digital marketing landscape. It examines how credentialing validates expertise, ensures quality, and facilitates career advancement in a rapidly evolving field. The chapter analyzes leading global certification programs, delves into the accreditation processes that ensure their rigor, and presents a case study on the tangible impact of certification on professional growth. 41 Role of certification in professional development. In the dynamic and often fragmented field of digital marketing, professional certifications serve as a crucial mechanism for standardizing knowledge, validating competencies, and signaling expertise to employers, clients, and peers. Unlike university degrees, which provide broad foundational knowledge, certifications are typically focused on validating specific, current, and practical skills. The primary roles of certification in professional development include knowledge validation and standardization. Certifications provide a structured curriculum that covers the core components of a digital marketing discipline, e.g., SEO, PPC, data analytics, content strategy. Passing a certification exam offers third-party validation that an individual possesses a standardized body of knowledge, reducing the uncertainty for employers hiring in a field with no universal entry requirements. Keeping pace with innovation, the digital marketing landscape is perpetually changing with new algorithms, platforms, and consumer behaviors. Certification bodies are obligated to update their curricula regularly, ensuring that certified professionals are knowledgeable about current best practices, tools, and trends. Unlike static academic textbooks, career advancement and mobility, a certification acts as a portable credential that enhances a resume, often leading to increased interview callbacks, higher starting salaries, and eligibility for promotions. It provides a competitive edge in both traditional employment and freelance markets, building client and employer trust. For agencies and consultants, having team members hold certifications from recognized bodies, e.g., DMI, Google, Facebook Blueprint, serves as a trust signal to potential clients. It demonstrates a commitment to professionalism and expertise, helping to win business in a competitive marketplace. Structured learning pathway, for career changers or marketers looking to specialize, certification programs offer a clear and structured learning pathway to acquire new skills efficiently, often with associated study materials and resources. 42 leading certification programs, e.g., DMI, AMA. The certification market is diverse, ranging from platform-specific credentials to broad, strategic marketing qualifications. The best certification depends on an individual's career goals, specialization, and experience level. Digital Marketing Institute, DMI Focus, global and strategic DMI certifications are among the most widely recognized professional designations in the industry. Key programs: Certified Digital Marketing Professional, CDMP, Master in Digital Marketing, and Specialized certifications in areas like digital strategy and planning. Distinguishing feature: DMI certifications are less about the mechanics of a single platform and more about integrating digital channels into a cohesive marketing strategy. They are often endorsed by industry giants like Google, Facebook, and Twitter. Target audience: marketing managers, strategists, and career changers seeking a comprehensive, globally respected credential. American Marketing Association, AMA Focus, traditional marketing principles applied to digital contexts. The AMA is a venerable institution in the marketing world. Key programs: Professional Certified Marketer, PCM registered trademark, in digital marketing. Distinguishing feature: the AMA's PCM exam is accredited by the American National Standards Institute, ANSI, against the ISO 17024 standard, signifying a rigorous and unbiased development process. It emphasizes the intersection of classic marketing fundamentals with digital tactics. Target audience: marketers with a traditional background looking to formalize their digital expertise within a well-established framework. Platform-specific certifications: Google offers a suite of certifications via Google Skill Shop, including the renowned Google Ads certifications, search, display, video, etc., and Google Analytics individual qualification, GAIQ, value, essential for any practitioner running campaigns on Google's platforms. They are highly technical and prove proficiency with the tools. Meta Blueprint, certifications for advertising on Facebook and Instagram. Value, demonstrates expertise in planning, buying, and measuring campaigns across the Meta ecosystem. HubSpot offers certifications in inbound marketing, content marketing, email marketing, and sales software. Value, ideal for marketers operating in an inbound methodology framework and using the HubSpot platform. Table, comparison of leading broad-based certification programs. Aspect Digital Marketing Institute, DMI, AMA, PCM. Digital marketing platform specific, e.g., Google, primary focus: integrated digital strategy. Marketing fundamentals in digital context. Technical proficiency on a specific platform. Global recognition: very high, especially in the US, extremely high, for that platform. Accreditation: industry endorsed ANSI/ISO 17024 accredited. Vendor specific: ideal for strategists, managers, generalists, all-round marketers, career advancers, PPC specialists, SEO analysts, platform managers. 43 Accreditation processes and standards. Not all certifications are created equal. The value of a credential is directly tied to the rigor of its development and governance. This is where accreditation plays a vital role. What is accreditation? Accreditation is a process by which an independent, Authoritative body evaluates a certification program against a set of predefined standards to ensure its validity, reliability, and fairness. Key standards: ISO 17024. The international benchmark for personnel certification bodies is ISO/IEC 17024. The standard requires certifications to conduct a job task analysis, JTA. The certification body must systematically analyze the actual tasks, knowledge, and skills required for the job role. The certification represents this, ensures the exam reflects real-world requirements, ensure exam validity and reliability. The exam must consistently measure what it claims to measure, validity, and produce stable and consistent results across different test takers and administrations. Reliability: this involves rigorous psychometric analysis of test questions, maintain impartiality. The certification body must have policies to avoid conflicts of interest, ensuring the credential is not simply a revenue-generating product but a legitimate assessment of competence. Establish recertification requirements. To combat obsolescence, accredited certifications require periodic recertification through continuing education or re-examination, ensuring professionals stay current. Why it matters: a certification that follows these processes, like the AMAS PCM, carries significantly more weight than one that does not. It tells employers that the credential is a true measure of competency, not just a certificate of completion from a short training course. 44 Case study: impact of certification on career advancement. Subject: Maria, a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized B2B software company. Pre-certification scenario: Maria had a traditional marketing degree and 4 years of experience primarily in event coordination and email blasts. She was eager to move into a digital-focused role but lacked formal training in SEO, PPC, or analytics. Her job applications for digital specialist roles were consistently rejected in favor of candidates with more demonstrable technical skills. Intervention: Maria pursued and earned 2 certifications over 6 months, 1 DMI Certified Digital Marketing Professional, CDMP, to build a comprehensive strategic foundation, 2 Google Analytics Individual Qualification, GAIQ, to gain a technical, hands-on credential in a high-demand area. Post-certification impact: within 3 months, Maria updated her LinkedIn profile and resumed with the certifications. She began receiving 30% more inbound messages from recruiters for digital marketing roles. Within 6 months, she applied internally for a newly created digital growth specialist role. During the interview, she used the framework and terminology from her DMI studies to propose a new content and SEO strategy. She demonstrated her GAIQ proficiency by auditing the company's analytics account and presenting findings. Result: Maria was offered the position with a 20% salary increase. Furthermore, her new certification gave her the confidence and credibility to advocate for a larger digital marketing budget, which was approved. Key takeaways from the case study: tangible ROI. The financial investment in certification was recouped within the first year through the salary increase. Internal mobility. Certification provided the validated expertise Maria needed to transition within her company, which already valued her institutional knowledge. Combination strategy. The combination of a broad strategic certification, DMI, and a niche technical certification, Google, made her profile extremely attractive, proving she could both think strategically and execute tactically. Credibility and confidence. The certifications provided external validation that gave both Maria and her employers confidence in her ability to perform in the new role. Chapter 5, Technology and Tools for Licensed Digital Marketing. Introduction. The intersection of intellectual property, IP, licensing and digital marketing creates a complex environment requiring precision,